Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have Paul Tieger with us, and he is the author of the book, Just Your Type. This is a book on relationships, and he's also written the books Do What You Are, which is a career book, and Nurture by Nature, which is a parenting book. And he's contributed a lot of literature to typology, so it's a pleasure to have you on, Paul. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Could you let the viewers know a little bit about you for those who are new to you?
Sure. Yeah, I know that your people are interested in personality type.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I've been type obsessed for over 40 years when I first learned about this. And so for the last 40 plus years, I've been thinking about, writing about, speaking about, getting daily insights about personality type. And as you mentioned, I wrote those three books, Just Your Type, Do What You Are, Nurture by Nature, and also another one called The Art of Speed Reading People. I've also done a lot of research on personality type and healthcare issues, health risk factors. I was a jury consultant for 25 years, so I helped lawyers to understand who prospective jurors would be and how to communicate with them and help them select and communicate with jurors. So I've been around the block for a long time, done a lot of work on personality type.
Cool. Yeah, you contributed a lot of great things to type, so I really have to thank you for that, and the community is very thankful for that too.
Welcome. You're welcome.
And Paul also has a website, and it's called De-Stress RX, and I'll have it linked below. And so, Paul, would you like to tell us a bit about De-Stress RX?
De-Stress RX is a tool that I created in response to, the stress that the whole world has experienced over the last 2.5-3 years. And it starts off with a very quick but accurate personality assessment. It takes 3.5 minutes. It's over 90% accurate. And people are able to instantly download their De-Stress RX for each of the 16 types. And each De-Stress RX identifies 8 stress triggers, things that are likely to stress that type, 8 symptoms, what it looks like when that person gets typed, and 8 success strategies, what you can actually do that will work to help manage and reduce your stress.
Which is really, really helpful for people in these times right now. So I'll have a link below, and it's an affiliate link. It's a nice way to also support the channel too. So feel free to check it out. It's always nice to figure out more ways to deal better with stress. I think that's a wonderful resource for it. And so I'm wondering, Paul, you mentioned how you've done studies in the medical sector about type, and you've actually done a lot of journals on type too, and you've done a lot of research. And so I'm wondering about some of your findings.
Sure. Well, I was very lucky to collaborate and be invited to participate with some of the top researchers in the country, the University of Minnesota College of Pharmacy. And we've done 5 studies. 5 of those have all been published in peer-reviewed study journals. And the first one looked at personality type and medication adherence. In other words, a big problem in this country is only about half the people that are prescribed medications take them. Now you can have all kinds of feelings about the pharmaceutical industry and whether it's good, whether it's bad, but the reality is some medications are very, very helpful and important to keep people healthy, and only about half the people are taking them. So I was wondering who are the people that are most likely to take those, and who are the ones that are less likely? And then the idea being that maybe when we figure that out, we can help increase the number of people who are more likely to be adherent, what they call medication adherent. So sure enough, we found out with this first study with 16,700 people, which was a lot of people. Most studies involve a small n or small number. This 16,700 is a very large study, cross-representational study. And we found that there was a strong correlation between personality type and medication adherence, combined with certain demographic factors. In other words, sensing judging types, it's one of the temperament groups, were very compliant. People who were sensing perceiving were the least adherent. And then when you added in other factors, people that are more educated were more adherent. People that women were more adherent than men were. So when you started to build that case, you saw that educated, sensing, judging females were much, much more adherent than less educated, male, sensing, perceiving types. I mean, palpably different, statistically significantly different. So from that, we're able to say, okay, in 3 minutes with this assessment, we're able to predict which kinds of people are more likely and less likely to actually be medication adherent.
Which is mind-blowing.
And one of the other things I would say, Joyce, is that, so another study, separate study, looked at health risk factors. In other words, what are the things that cause people problems, including anxiety, depression, sleep issues, overweight, alcohol, smoking, nutrition. And the results on that were with 10,500 people. And they were also quite dramatic, that showed that, as predicted, the sensing judging types, who are people who by nature are very responsible, reliable, dependable, they like to do what they're supposed to be doing, they believe and trust in the white coats the doctors are wearing and the institution, etc. They were most adherent and they had the fewest health risk factors. And again, the sensing perceiving types had the most health risk factors.
Fascinating. Yeah. And you also have a PowerPoint slide, or a few PowerPoint slides on this too, right? I'm sure
people... Can I show you some?
Yeah.
Okay, so hang on a second. Okay, so I think of temperament as 4 different human natures. And there are traditionalists, which are the sensing judging types. They're about 46% of the population. And they're responsible, dependable, reliable. They do the right things. They follow the rules. And then there are the experiencers, who actually are the sensing perceiving types. And they're about 27% of the population. And they're really all about freedom and living in the moment, enjoying their life, taking risks, being spontaneous. And then there are conceptualizers, who are the intuitive thinking types, that are only about 10% of the population. And those folks are all about being successful, competent, challenged, innovative. And then there are the idealists, who are the intuitive feeling types, about 17% of the population. And they are about authenticity, meaning, relationships, the search for what we're doing in life, those kinds of things. So when I looked at the research that I'm going to share with you, I broke it down mostly by temperament. So these are the 4 temperaments in terms of their nature. These are some of the characteristics that these folks have. Responsible, dependable, organized for the traditionalists, casual, adaptable, spontaneous for the experiencers, confident, competent, and strategic for the conceptualizers, and empathetic, compassionate, and communicative for the idealists. So what I'd like to show you now is a list of the health risk factors that the study of 10,500 people looked at. And on this left side here, the risk factors: medication non-adherence, anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, smoking, lack of exercise, poor nutrition, sleep issues. You see that although traditionalists, the SJs, are 46% of the population, there are practically none of the health risk factors. It's because they do what they're supposed to do. On the other hand, the experiencers, the SPs, had all the risk factors. So they're about 27% of the population, but almost half the risk factors. And if you did the analysis and showed how much these folks cost systems in terms of illnesses that could be prevented, diabetes, certain heart disease, et cetera, you'd find it way more, I think more than the 46%. It might be as much as 60 or 70% of healthcare costs are caused by experiencers or SPs. The conceptualizers, who are the intuitive thinking types, had only 2 risk factors. And the idealists, the intuitive feeling types, had 4 risk factors, and they're all around behavioral issues: anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, and sleep issues. So then after this study, I went back to my researchers and said, these NFs, these intuitive feeling types, really are predominant in this area. Can we do a deep dive analysis of just those folks? And that's what I want to show you now. So what this shows are the 16 types. And the ones in green above the line are ones who are less likely, based on their percentages in the population, to report anxiety or depression. So ISTJs are 25% less likely to report depression in this case, whereas all the way over here, INFPs are 41% more likely, based on how many people there are that are INFPs in the population. So you see that there's a very great disparity here. All 4 of the SJ types are here, and all 4 of the NF types are in this group. So that's for depression. When you look at anxiety, the numbers are very, very, very close. Again, ISTJs are 31% less likely to develop anxiety, and INFPs are 49% more likely. All of the NFs were reflected in this group that are more likely to have anxiety, and 3 of the 4 SJ types are in the group that reported less anxiety. And then the really kind of most dramatic thing to me is in terms of severe depression and anxiety, ESTJs and ISTJs were 37% less likely, and INFPs were 86% more likely to report anxiety and depression. So these are some pretty dramatic findings. And really, this is the first time this kind of study, to my knowledge, has been done.
I feel bad for INFPs. They're both more likely to have depression and anxiety. Yeah, and the NF types in general are more prone to depression and anxiety. Ooh.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Paul. Those were amazing findings, and they are very unique too, because no one else has done studies on this. So
thank you. I understand the theory. I've been teaching it for a long time. Well, my interest is developing practical applications. So in other words, Do What You Are was all about how to find the right career based on who you are. Nurture by Nature was all about how to parent children who are different from you and your spouse or their siblings. Just Your Type was all about personal relationships, how to make those the most positive and healthy you can. And The Art of Speedreading People is all about how to communicate with all kinds of folks. So this research is not just of interest to me. I think that if I was a parent, which I am a parent, but if I was a parent of young children, it'd be really helpful to know that my kids are predisposed or my child is predisposed to anxiety or depression early on, rather than wait till they become a teenager. They're having all kinds of issues. So the research I did with anxiety and depression was really, there's a lot of populations. There's parents, there's teachers, there's educators, there's child psychologists, and individuals themselves.
It is amazing that you have all of this cumulative studies, because people, when they get into type, one of their questions is, how can I actually use type? And so you help answer one of the fundamental questions people come into type for. And so I was wondering, if someone knows that they're more predisposed to depression and anxiety, what steps would you take then from knowing the results of these studies?
Sure. Well, I think the reality is, even if you don't know that, or even if you don't know anything about personality type, people who are prone to anxiety and depression, they know it early on. They just don't feel like, they don't feel encouraged. They don't feel engaged. They might feel lonely. They might feel sad. And so it really gives people permission to understand, this is kind of who I am. This is what's going on. I can seek help earlier. If you're a parent, as I said before, I think it's really important not to just think that your kid's going through a phase or they're gloomy, or especially if you're a parent who is not naturally wired to understand or look for these kind of things. A lot of thinking parents might look at feeling type kids, if they don't really understand them, and just say, just buck up here. What are you crying about? Life is good. You got nothing to worry about. But if a kid is very, very sensitive and introspective, that's not the way to help that child develop self-esteem or feel good about themselves. So I think that there's many, many applications.
Mm-hmm. Those are wonderful applications. So you mentioned how the SPs, the experiencers, are more prone to all of the risk factors. And so I'm wondering, if someone has an SP in their life, how can they help that SP adhere more to those?
Very good question, Joyce. Excellent question. SPs can be tough. I mean, I'm trying not to bash SPs, because SPs have wonderful qualities as well. We need them in the world. There's things they do that other people don't do. A lot of SPs, for example, are first responders, a disproportionate number. And when somebody responds to a crisis, you want somebody calm, cool, collected, not emotional, not distracted by that shiny object. You want them to be right there doing their job, using the resources. And that's just one example. So there's some really important contributions that SPs make. But if you have an SP in your life, especially if it's a grown-up and you're a partner with that person, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to get them to go to the doctor, when they got a pain. It's going to be tough to get them to go for a yearly checkup. It's going to be tough to get them, or it may be tough to get them to take care of themselves in the way that they ought to, whether it's alcohol, or substance abuse, or other unhealthy behaviors. I think the first step really is, I don't have a magic bullet, but it's to be aware and to make your partner aware that this is what they've got going. They don't tend to do this. So they really need to think about that, because let's say you're partnered with an SP and you got little kids. Well, the message is, you want to be around for your kids. So being 30 pounds overweight and not exercising and stuff is something that can really impact not just the family, but your quality of life, because SPs really like to enjoy their life. So there's different ways of getting different types to engage. And I think that's one of the values of type.
Yeah, find a way to make adhering more appealing to them, adding a candy layer on top of that broccoli so it seems more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, for SPs, it's really about their losing their freedom, their enjoyment of life, because that's what they really value. So they're not really going to worry about the future too much. But if you say, look, Jim, you love playing golf. In 5 years from now, if you keep doing this, your diabetes is going to progress to the point where you might lose a leg. You're not going to be great on the golf course. It's some of those kind of tactics might work with sensing perceiving types.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your books. So let's start with Just Your Type. And so I was wondering for that book, as you were saying, it's a relationship book. And I was wondering about what are some of the key takeaways, the bullet points that you feel the most proud of writing about in that book?
Well, I think that Just Your Type was a breakthrough book in a lot of ways because we really did a ton of research. We did a lot of scientific research. We did a lot of anecdotal research. We interviewed couples. We interviewed couples counselors, and really hundreds and hundreds of people. And we tried to find out what are the things for each pairing, and there's like 128 different combinations of types, INFJ with an ENFP, etc. And so for each of those combinations, we wrote a chapter based on the research that talked about the joys, the things that work for that couple, the challenges, the things that are naturally points of conflict, and then the strategies that they can use. So it's very prescriptive for each of the types. And what we found, both from individuals and from a lot of therapists who use the book with their clients, is people read it and they go, whoa, how could they know that about me? Or how could they know that about my spouse? And then when they start understanding the dynamics, I'll just take one quick example. And it's never just one letter because people are whole types and it's much more complicated. But, extroverts are much more sociable, right? Introverts are much more internal and reserved. So when couples get together often, they get together because opposites do attract. You see something in somebody else that you wish you were more like, and you go, if I'm with her, she's an extrovert, I'm an introvert, I'll have more friends, I'll have more fun, I'll be more sociable, let me get with her. She looks at him and says, but he's so centered and calm, he can sit home, he can read a book, he can have deep thoughts, I wish I was more like that. If I'm with him, I will be more like that. Okay, that's what happens unconsciously. Now, you get together and Saturday night comes around and the extrovert says, okay, we're out of here. And the introvert goes, well, what do you mean we're out of here? He says, yeah, a bunch of people getting down, meeting down at the bar. We'll figure we're taking a movie. Then we'll go have a couple of drinks and we'll end up at John's house. And the introvert's going, what are you talking about? I've had a whole week of work. I just want to hang out just with you. Maybe we'll read together. Maybe we'll watch TV. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So Just Your Type was really helpful for helping couples understand why the other person is the way they are. They're not doing it just to be a pain in the neck, and to learn to accommodate. One of the strategies around that example I gave you is often for extroverts and introverts when they go to a social event is to take two cars. And when the introvert's done and wants to leave, they say, honey, I'm just kind of spent. And the extrovert says, great, I'll see you at home. So the extrovert gets what the extrovert wants. The introvert gets what the introvert wants. There's not resentment about you're pulling me out of here too soon or you're making me stay in a situation I don't want to be in. That's the way, the magic, I think, of the book, Just Your Type, because in a much more comprehensive way, it helps couples to really understand each other and hopefully to appreciate the differences, not just tolerate them.
Yeah, it really gives you an understanding of the other person and it helps you predict the challenges so that you can figure out ways to engineer it so you guys aren't resentful in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the book. I mean, that's the nature of the book.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And so I was also wondering about your book, Nurture by Nature. What are some lessons from that really impact you? I know the whole book's amazing, but
Thank
what
you.
are some of the things that you'd like to highlight in the book?
Well, I should say I wrote all these books with my former wife, Barbara Barron, and Do What You Are About Careers was the first book. Nurture by Nature was the second once we started having kids. So we realized, these little critters are very different from us. They're different from each other. And we believe that the key to self-esteem is for people to feel good about their gifts. And everyone's got gifts and everyone's got blind spots. And for parents to understand, we've had many, many parents who say to me, I don't know what planet this kid is from. That is very sad to me. When a parent doesn't understand a child, it's a serious matter. That's who ends up in therapy. A lot of people end up in therapy, but they might end up in therapy more often because they don't get nurtured in the way that they need to. You have a very sensitive child, maybe a feeling type child, and if their parents, if his or her parents tend to be kind of strong, tough thinking types, it's easy for them to not value that child's sensitivity, right? If parents are very extroverted and they've got an introverted kid, their tendency is to pull that kid into the world, into social situations, probably before they're ready, because that's what the parents, are comfortable with. So it's really giving parents an idea about themselves, who they are, and also what their children as individuals need. And children are all different. When I've spoken at different events, I ask 3 questions. I ask people, how many people have children? And about 80% of the hands go up. And then I say, how many of you have more than one child? And about 70% of the hands go up. And then I say, how many of your children are like each other? And pretty much every hand goes down.
Mm-hmm.
They're all different. I was doing a training just this week, and the leader of this team had 2 sets of fraternal twins, which is unusual. And they're all different. They're all different in utero. So they got the same parents. They're being parented the same way. They're going through the same religious experience, schools, family, food, all that stuff is the same, but their personalities are very different. So I think one of the messages of nurture is, I believe personality type is inborn. You come out of the womb with a type, you have that type for your whole life. Doesn't mean we don't change and grow as people as we get older, but our personality types, I don't believe, change. So one of the messages, we're born with our type, we all have gifts. Success and happiness comes from recognizing those gifts and having people around you who recognize and support you for them.
Mm-hmm. That's a good message.
Thank you.
And so it's true that no kid is the same as another kid. They're like snowflakes. Each one is individual and none is the same. And so it's important to find a way of nurturing your kid by nature, because then you're not bending them in a way where they might break. So just like if you try to bend a tree, you'll end up just breaking the tree, because trees, they bend up to an extent, but after a while, you could really damage someone by trying to turn them into, Linda Behrens says it's be like me syndrome. When we don't know about people's diversity and the ways that different people can be, we try to make them like us,
right.
or the world tries to force us to be like someone else. But either way, it's not respecting your nature. And in that way, it's a shame, because there's a lot of potential there that could go missing if you don't have that knowledge.
And I would think that's a very good point. I would just pick up on your tree analogy a little bit. There's some trees like a weeping willow that are very flexible, right? There's some trees like an oak tree that aren't going anywhere. So knowing your child's type and temperament can help you understand, are they more flexible naturally? Are they more solid? Do they grow better with a lot of sunlight and a lot of love? Do they grow better in a cold climate? There are some analogies that can be drawn with that. I will say one more thing, that the most common comment that I have heard about nurture by nature, and I can't even tell you how many times I've heard it over the years, is usually it's almost always women who say, I wish I had this book when my kids were little. But the second most common comment is, I wish my mother had this book when I was little. So that's validation for me whenever I hear that, because, parenting is tough. Parenting it's the toughest job, but the most rewarding job I've ever had. But there's no manual for it. We all inherit stuff from our parents. We find ourselves saying the same things our parents said to us that we vow we would never ever say, because we're modeling what we know. So I think nurture by nature is not the only way to parent, but I think it's a helpful way.
It is, yeah. And it sends a helpful message that if you know a person's nature, then you can set up an environment where that nature can succeed. As you're saying, some trees grow better in cold conditions and others in warmer conditions. And then you know how you can set someone up for success rather than failure. It's an amazing way to nurture the future of your children, to just see what their nature is and find a way to adapt your approach to the way that helps them thrive. And so you can either go uphill or you can go downhill. But if you know the downhill option, wouldn't you want to take the easier pathway with less resistance, or take the path of least resistance rather than to have a situation which is so hard to succeed? It's better to just create an environment where you can succeed. I really like your thoughts because they talk about the ways that we can set people up to succeed, that there's actually a kind of recipe. It's not a cut and dry because every relationship is different due to the nurture pieces.
Sure.
But if you know their nature, you know a big portion of it. That can really be revolutionary.
Personality really is nature and nurture. Nature is the personality type. It's the stuff that you are, your material. Nurture is everything else that happens to you. Your parents, the zeitgeist, what times you live in, where you live, what kind of values your community instills in you. So it's really a combination of nature and nurture.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And so sometimes people place everything on personality type, and I'm like, whoa, yeah, the fact that you like the color black is not because you are this. There are some things that, like, sometimes people, when they learn about personality type, they'll place every single thing in the realm of this is a personality type thing.
This is a very typical syndrome for people who really get invested, because the light bulbs go on. We get so excited. Oh, that explains that. That explains that. So the way I explain that is to say that personality type explains a lot, but it doesn't explain everything.
Yeah.
I think it's in that one sentence sort of is good advice to follow.
Yeah, I hard agree. There are a lot of nurture aspects like culture, gender, other things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd love to talk to you, Paul, about your other book too, which is Do What You Are, and it's around careers. And if
Do What You Are I'm very proud of Do What You Are. It was really the first book that linked personality type with career satisfaction and success. And it came out like 25 years ago. So the first, before that, the world of career counseling, the belief was that if you match a person's values, interests, and skills, you're going to get a good match. But the truth is, all three of those, values, interests, and skills, are very transitory, and they're different when you're 18 years old, when most people have to make career decisions, go to college, not go to college, major in this, major in that, not major in that, et cetera, than with the more mature person. So what does stay the same is personality type. You're born with your type, you got your type. And so I think it's a much better predictor and guide for career decision-making than those three alone. And I think it actually trumps all three of those, right? So you think about it, when you're 18, what do you know? I mean, I know I didn't know much, when I was 18. My values are either my parents, or if I'm rebelling, the opposite of my parents. My skills are only what I've learned in school or maybe outside school, and interests are very limited. So type really opens up the world. So Do What You Are really changed a lot around the way people think about their careers. I'm very gratified about it. It's sold well over 1 million copies at this point in 6 editions. The last edition was, I've been doing it so long that my daughter Kelly was the co-author. So she was the primary author in the last edition. And I've heard from people around the world about this book. It's in many, many different languages. And so I feel like it has made a contribution. I'm very grateful for my part of that.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that these books they're made on scientific studies that you've actually done. And so I'm wondering, how did you go about doing those studies? Where can people find them if people are curious about them?
Well, the studies on the health stuff were all scientific studies. The other studies were more anecdotal studies, but what's called qualitative research than quantitative research.
Yeah.
In Just Your Type, there's summary of a lot of the research results.
Okay.
In the health stuff, they can find it from my website, iconnecthealth.com. So it's iconnecthealth.com. There's a listing there of all the studies, the original journal article. People can read the whole article if they want.
That's fantastic. And you also mentioned speed reading, and you incorporate that in personality types. So I'm wondering, how do you incorporate speed reading into personality type?
Well, it's more the other way around. How do I incorporate? I've developed a system of speed reading and speed reaching people based on personality type. And I mentioned that I was a jury consultant for many, many years. And my job was to kind of supply the psychological input on what happens in a trial for lawyers and judges and who basically don't believe in psychology or have much exposure to that. So I had to learn how to look at people and very quickly identify certain characteristics. And so the system for speed reading people really takes into account things like that are observable clues: their demeanor, their energy level, their language, their appearance, sometimes body language. And so develop the system, and some things you're able to see from preferences. For example, extroverts talk a lot more than introverts. If you ask an extrovert a question, they'll start talking.
True.
If you ask an introvert a question, they'll usually pause.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Sensing types are very concrete. They give you all the facts, the details, specifics. Intuitives are much more possibility, amorphous, idea kind of folks. So if their language is a very good clue for that. Thinking types are very logical and analytical. Feeling types use a lot of value words like it's wonderful, it's terrible, I love it, I hate it, she's a jerk, he's masterful, etc. And behavioral stuff has to do with judging and perceiving as well. So I developed a system that uses both preferences like extroversion, introversion, also temperament, and also a third root, which is whether people extrovert or introvert feelings. It's probably a little more complicated than we want to get into now, but some people really show the world their feeling side and some people don't. And if you understand that shorthand, then that helps you narrow it down from like 16 types, possible types, to 8 types, to 4 types, to 2 types, to 1 type. And then, but the point of speed reading people is really to speed reach them. It's to be able to get on their wavelength. And I think the thing you said, about Linda Barron's, who's a very smart woman, is the way I say that is everyone wants other people to be like them. Mm-hmm. We all want people to be like us. And we all relate best and most easily to people who are like us. So that's fine. So no problem communicating if somebody's like you. It's if they're really different than you, what do you do? And so The Art of Speed Reading People is a very prescriptive book that tells you, here's how you can find out who these folks are, and here's how you can speed reach them, which is to speak to them on their wavelength.
Well put. This is basically ways on how to type people quickly, is what I'm getting. Yeah. All right.
Typing them is one thing. What you do with it is another thing. If you're typing somebody just so you can put them in a box and dismiss them, intuitive thinking types are always like that, I don't have to deal with you, or they're too hard to deal with. Or feeling types are too emotional, I don't want to deal with you. But if you do it with the intention of understanding who that person is so that you can communicate better, then I think that's really my goal.
Got it, yeah. And you skimmed over the J and P dichotomy, and so I was wondering about your speed reading techniques.
From the clues?
Yeah, clues.
Well, appearance is a good clue. When I was a jury consultant, for example, the judging types, especially the sensing judging types, always came very buttoned down. They were dressed appropriately for their court experience. They weren't rumpled, they weren't crumpled up, they weren't, their shirts weren't open and their hair wasn't combed. And even when they're sitting in a chair, they're kind of rolling around. They have a much more casual approach to life. Judging types, especially sensing judging types, are much more attuned to appropriate behavior, finite. They more answer questions than ask questions. So there's clues like that. The casualness versus the formality is a big one.
That makes a lot of sense. Those are really good because you address the big hitter questions that people ask when they get into type. Like people ask, well, how do I type people? Type can't be practical if I don't even know anyone else's type except my own. And so having a book where you're like, hey, you can actually have clues to type, and these are things that you can actually look for. You actually help make it more practical for people so you can actually apply the theory rather than just ideating or thinking about the theory, and you take it to the next step, which actually makes it more useful in life. And so you raise the usefulness of type through your books. One of them improves your career compatibility. The other one is how to parent your child better. And the other one is relationship compatibility. And so you're really giving useful information for people to actually use. And so they're not just thinking about type, but they get to put into practice. And so that they're not just learning information, but they can put it into action. And so that's good, because a lot of people look for that and they're trying to find that because they're like, oh, type is so theoretical, but they just can't find how can you make this theory something that you can use in your day-to-day life.
Right.
And you really answer all of the main questions that people wonder about by actually collecting a lot of information, both qualitative and quantitative. And that is...
Well, thank you. Thanks for that endorsement. Appreciate it.
That is superbly helpful. And so I was wondering about your website, De-Stress.
De-Stress. It's DE-STRESSRX, like the prescription, destressrx.com. Yeah, so it's a very simple website to operate. People are able to take this assessment. They can take the assessment for free and get some of the information about what their stressors and strategies are, so they can look at that and say, I want to see the whole report, or I don't want to see the whole report. If they want to see the report, then I tried to price this thing at $10, $9.95. So, the cost of a couple of cups of coffee at Starbucks, and I think it can make some big differences in people's lives. So that's the idea behind it.
Is there a sample report that people can look at to see what they're getting into?
Yeah. Well, what it is, if you take the assessment, then it will say you came out as an ENTP. And here are some of the things that are triggers for you, some of the things that are symptoms, and some strategies. It's not the entire report. So it gives the person enough to go, this is something that I think resonates with me. I would like to learn more. It's worth it to me. Or, I don't think this guy gets me, and so I'm not interested. I think most people find it very accurate and very helpful.
Yeah. And it's super, super relevant for today's times too.
I think so. The whole world is under stress.
They really are. Yeah. And so it's great to have the resources to deal with stress more effectively. And so I think that your test is extremely helpful, because in today's world, people are really dealing with stress. And I think even outside of the pandemic, people are stressed. And it can be quite insidious because people don't realize they're stressed all the time, because it's hard to admit to yourself, to give yourself permission to slow down and to actually acknowledge it.
I think you're right about giving permission, but I think it's also, human beings are not meant to be under this kind of constant stress.
Yeah.
So we can't be attending to it all the time. We have to shut it down or our heads would explode, right? So that doesn't mean we're not being affected. That doesn't mean our bodies and our minds aren't being tremendously affected. It's just that we can't dwell on that too much, or else we would just go nuts.
Very true. Very true. Well, it seems like an extremely cool test to take. So audience members, feel free to look below. There is a link to the test where you can take it and you can see if it resonates. And it's an affiliate link. So thank you, Paul. I really appreciate you coming out and discussing typology with me and some of the things that you've learned along your journey, and for bestowing your wisdom among my subscribers. And it's really nice to have heard about the ways in which you've contributed to the field of type with your special touch to it. And
I got to thank you, and I thank you for your work too, because I've been on your site and it is full of great information. So you've done a terrific job of pulling out important information and presenting it in a way that makes it usable. So thank you for that.
Yeah, something that we share is wanting to get the input of people of the types to then actually get an objective take before we disseminate information.
Right.
So as you mentioned, your books are based off of qualitative information, and the interviews I do are qualitative too. And so I really respect that. You actually put in the field work, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all that you are. You really help people make the most of their innate nature, and so that they can live more fulfilled lives through acknowledging the differences between us. Isabel Briggs Myers, her goal with type was to respect the gifts differing among all of us, to find the way to best utilize our gifts differing. And so you do that. And so
Thank you. I was very fortunate because Isabel Myers had a collaborator named Mary McCauley. And Mary McCauley is somebody I met very early in my journey, and she sort of became my mentor. So I'm one step removed. I never met Isabel. She died just a couple of years before I got involved in type. But Mary became an important influence in my life, and Mary was at Isabel's right hand, when she created this stuff. So, or when she worked on it. So I've had the benefit of some great mentors.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. And so I appreciate everyone for watching. I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.
Bye, everybody.